In 2026, the most powerful tastemakers in Hollywood employ 22 people. 22. Not 22,000. Not 2,200. Just 22. They work out of Auckland, New Zealand, a city most studio executives could not find on a map. Their platform has no algorithm, no For You page, no engagement-optimized feed designed to keep you scrolling. It does not tell you what to watch. It does not recommend anything. And yet, when the 28 million people on this platform decide a film is worth seeing, the entire industry moves. This is Letterboxd, and this is the rule hidden inside their story. The smallest companies win the biggest markets, not by growing fast, but by refusing to become something they are not. To understand why Letterboxd matters, you have to understand the problem it was built to solve. And it's a genuinely embarrassing one. Matthew Buchanan and Carl Von Rando were web designers living in Auckland in 2011. They loved movies deeply, the kind of people who had opinions about cinematography, who caught references others missed, who could tell you why a particular director's framing choices mattered, and yet they kept running into the same problem over and over. They couldn't remember what they'd already seen. They'd start recommending a film to a friend and realize halfway through, wait, have I actually watched this or did I just read about it? They'd hear about a new release and not know if it was on their list, already watched, or something they'd abandoned 20 minutes in. This is a problem most people recognize immediately. It's the movie version of starting a book you've already read. You don't realize until you're 20 pages in. So they built a solution, not a startup, not a platform. A personal film diary, a simple tool to track what you'd seen and what you thought about it.
They called it Letterboxd after letterboxing,
the practice of adding black bars to preserve a film's original aspect ratio on screen. It was a small name for what they expected to be a small thing. In October 2011, they launched a private version at a web conference in Brooklyn. 40, maybe 50 people were in the room. They expected film nerds, people who cared about frame rates and whether the director's cut was better than the theatrical release. What they got slowly, unexpectedly, then all at once was something much larger. But here's what makes this story strange. For the first 9 years, almost nothing happened, and that turned out to be exactly right. Until March 2020, Letterboxd had 0 full-time employees. 0. 2 founders, no office, no funding, no growth team. Just the 2 of them maintaining something people loved using. This is the part of the story that's easy to misread as failure. In Silicon Valley terms, which are the terms most of us have been trained to use, Letterboxd was doing everything wrong. It wasn't raising venture capital. It wasn't optimizing for daily active users. It wasn't running A/B tests on its onboarding flow. It was just there. Available. Clean. Doing what it said it would do. By 2020, it had about 1 million users. On paper, that looks reasonable. Until you put it next to IMDb, the obvious comparison, which had 250 million at the same moment. By the metrics tech culture uses to measure success, Letterboxd wasn't a contender. It was a rounding error. But here's the thing about building something people genuinely love, rather than something people are algorithmically nudged to use. The love compounds. Users weren't just logging films and leaving. They were writing reviews, long ones, personal ones, reviews that read like diary entries or letters to friends. They were building lists, films that wrecked me, watch before you travel to Japan, movies my dad would hate. They were recommending films to each other and following critics whose taste they trusted more than the ones in newspapers. The platform had built something that the algorithm-driven apps couldn't manufacture, a community with actual taste. And then March 2020 arrived. A pandemic closed every cinema on Earth. And Letterboxd accidentally became the most important film platform nobody had heard of. The math of what happened after 2020 is almost hard to believe. In January 2020, there were 1 million users. By the end of 2020, 3 million. By 2022, 7 million. By 2024, 17 million. By 2026, 28 million. That is 28 times their 2020 size in 6 years, with a team that peaked at 22 people. To understand why, you have to understand what the pandemic actually did to movie culture. When cinemas shut down, people did not stop caring about movies. They became more interested in them. Stripped of other distractions, stuck at home with streaming services and time, people started watching more intentionally. They sought out films they had always meant to see. They developed opinions. And then they needed somewhere to put those opinions. The obvious places, like Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube comments, were chaotic and noisy. The conversation was scattered and hard to follow. You would post a thought about a film, and it would vanish in 30 seconds. Letterboxd was different. It was designed specifically for this. Each film had its own page, its own community of reviews, its own running conversation. You could see what your friends had watched. You could find critics whose taste aligned with yours. You could build a permanent record of everything you had seen, a film diary that meant something. Word spread the way things spread when people genuinely mean it. Not through ads, not through algorithms, but through people telling other people. There is a place on the internet where the film conversation is actually good. By 2022, film studios had noticed something important. The people on Letterboxd were not average moviegoers. Internal research showed that Letterboxd users watched significantly more films than typical audiences, spent more money on movies, and, crucially, influenced the viewing decisions of people around them at a rate far higher than average. These were the tastemakers, the multipliers. The platform had concentrated them in a single place with a built-in feedback mechanism, the rating, the review, the list, which amplified their influence even further. The clearest case study is Everything Everywhere, All at Once. A24 released it in March 2022 with a $25 million budget and an opening in just 2 theaters. No franchise, no marketing power, no recognizable IP.
What it had was Letterboxd.
The film became one of the highest-rated movies in the platform's history almost immediately. Users were not just rating it 5 stars. They were writing about it the way people write about films that change them. The word of mouth built for months, unstoppable. By the time it was done, Everything Everywhere All at Once had crossed $100 million globally, the first A24 film ever to hit that mark, and the first time that studio had a genuine mainstream blockbuster on its hands. But Letterboxd's influence wasn't purely transactional. It was cultural in a way studios couldn't manufacture. In December 2024, fans discovered that a Letterboxd account called It's Charlib, which had been quietly logging old horror movies, art house classics, and cult favorites for months, belonged to Charli XCX. At the absolute peak of her cultural moment, one of the most discussed artists on the internet was spending her downtime on a platform that did not pay her, did not verify her, and did not treat her differently than any other user. Her response? She updated her bio to read, "My account got leaked, I guess." She had logged over 2,000 hours of film. Martin Scorsese is on the platform. Jack Harlow quietly used it to reveal that his taste runs toward Hitchcock. Filmmakers, directors, festival programmers, all of them there, using it the same way the original film nerds used it. Not because Letterboxd courted them, because the platform was worth being on. And then, in 2026, the story got stranger still. In September 2023, a Canadian holding company called Tiny acquired a 60% majority stake at a valuation of $50 to $60 million. Buchanan and Von Rando stayed on. Then in April 2026, word leaked that Tiny was exploring a sale at a valuation well above what they had paid 3 years earlier. Investment banks were involved and Hollywood media companies were in conversations. The same two web designers who had built a film diary so they would not forget what they had watched were now at the center of a Hollywood acquisition story. Here is where the lesson lives. The instinct is to look at that moment and call it the payoff, the exit. But that is not the interesting part. The interesting part is the path. Letterboxd reached 28 million users without a growth team, without an algorithm designed to maximize session time, without venture capital in its first 12 years, and without ever fundamentally changing what the product was. They built something people actually wanted and then refused, stubbornly and consistently, to ruin it. When platforms scale, the pressure to over-monetize is enormous. To introduce algorithmic feeds that surface what is popular rather than what is good. To sell attention to advertisers rather than serve it to users. This process even has a name. Technologists call it enshittification, the predictable degradation of platforms as they prioritize revenue extraction over user value. Letterboxd resisted every version of that pressure. Their interface in 2026 is recognizably the same platform that launched in 2013. The core experience, log a film, rate it, write about it, follow people whose taste you trust, has not changed. In a decade of platforms pivoting, optimizing, and quietly degrading, Letterboxd just stayed. And the 28 million people who showed up are there because of that refusal. Not in spite of it, because of it. That is the real lesson inside what looks like a film nerd story. The companies that win the next decade will not all be the ones that scaled the fastest. Some of them will be the ones that knew what they were, stayed faithful to it, and let the compound interest of genuine quality do the work that growth teams could not. 22 employees, 28 million users. The most influential tastemaker in Hollywood, built not by growing fast, but by refusing to grow wrong. Every video on this channel is built around one number and one rule. This one was 22, and the rule was, refuse to become something you are not. If that's the kind of story you come here for, you're exactly where you should be. I'll see you at the next one.